Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lidar Velazian. Coming up in today's newscast. An IDF soldier was killed and others injured Saturday night in an explosion at a military base in central Israel. Protests in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa over the government's proposed legal reforms. And anti-Semitism on the rise in the United States. A new report reveals some startling statistics. An IDF soldier was killed and 3 additional soldiers were injured as a result of a munitions explosion at a military base in central Israel. Meanwhile, a spate of terrorist attacks occurring over the weekend in Judea Samaria. ILTV's Aaron Porras with all the details.
The IDF announcing Sunday that 1 soldier was killed and 3 others injured on base in the center of the country in an explosion that occurred Saturday night. After extensive resuscitation efforts, the soldier was declared dead, an additional soldier severely wounded, and 2 others lightly injured. Preliminary reports indicating the soldier's death was caused by a grenade that accidentally went off. The military police launching an investigation into the circumstances, and their findings will be transferred to the Military General Advocate Corps. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Israeli troops shooting and seriously injuring a Palestinian who charged at them with a knife in the town of Silwad in Judea Samaria. According to initial reports, Palestinians in the area were throwing stones at the Israeli forces when the Palestinian suspect ran at the troops wielding a knife. And also, 2 other Palestinian terrorists were shot and killed on Saturday after they opened fire on Israeli soldiers in Judea and Samaria. According to the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers operating near the village of Jabba, near Jenin in Judea and Samaria, came under fire from multiple suspects in a passing vehicle, the troops returning fire at the car, which crashed into a wall, and the IDF saying that it identified suspects being hit. No soldiers were injured in this attack. The Palestinian Authority Health Ministry identifying the 2 men as Izzadim Bassem Hamamra and Amjad Adnan Khalilia, the Palestinian terrorist group Islamic Jihad claiming the 2 dead men as its members. Other reports indicating that one of them was also claimed by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, an armed offshoot of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah faction. After searching the car, security forces confiscating an M16 submachine gun.
And an estimated 80,000 protesters turned out in the driving rain to Tel Aviv to protest the government's plans for sweeping change to the justice system. Smaller protests took place in Jerusalem and Haifa and all remained peaceful, except for a few minor scuffles between protesters and police. ILTV's Steve Liebovitz was in Tel Aviv.
The protest was called for the Habima theater area, but despite a pouring rain, the streets were clogged with demonstrators for blocks around the site.
We will come in every weather to demonstrate for democracy and equality and honesty and stop corruption.
People came to the central rally in Tel Aviv from all over the country. Men, women, teens, and even kids were there in droves, and their message to the authorities was clear. Protesters carried placards, Israeli flags, and many umbrellas, with the protest chants calling for defending democracy against plans to shackle the courts. The story of this protest is that it's impossible to get within a half a kilometer. All of the people that have come to the protest have spilled out into all of the side streets in a driving rain with all of the puddles, and they're out here because they believe that this is the way to send the message that the changes that the government is proposing are not for them. Tell me why it was important for you to come out here today.
Because I want a decent government running this country and not the people that are running it at the moment, and changing the laws in order to suit themselves.
Protesters seemed pleased with the turnout.
I was just thinking that when I was 17, I went to this kikar and I demonstrated for peace. And now we don't speak about peace, but we do have to come and demonstrate because we have to keep our country. I mean, I feel, and all of the people here, I'm sure, we feel that Israel is not going to be the same if our government is going to proceed with all this things that she wants to proceed with.
Many opposition members attended the rally, but they were not invited to speak by the organizing NGOs. Former Justice Minister Tzipi Livni told the gathering, "Together, we must protect the state of Israel. No one is above the law, and the law is for all of us."
And joining us now with more on the protests against the proposed legal reforms is ILTV reporter Steve Liebovitz. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Lidar.
So you were at the protest last night in the rain. I'm curious, how was the atmosphere there?
Well, what I found remarkable was how many people were willing to get off their couches on a cold, wet Saturday night and trudge their way towards Habima. And I can tell you that many, many thousands never made it to Habima because all of the streets in the surrounding area were all clogged. Starting about half a kilometer away, you literally would have had to push your way through the crowds. The mood was, I would say, it was people that are peace-loving people, and they were certainly not there for clashes or any such thing with security forces that were there really on the sidelines. And it was people that wanted to make their thoughts known.
Now, we also saw lots of Israeli flags this time around. The organizers apparently handing out flags to ensure that this is an Israeli protest, unlike perhaps the previous one. But, you know, we have seen some images of pro-Palestinian flags being flown at the protest. What can you tell us about that?
From my vantage point, not one Palestinian flag was in sight. There were, of course, Israeli flags, plenty of them. Not that many of those either, because most people had umbrellas that they were trying to, protect themselves from the rain. I did see, interestingly, a few Likud banners, people that had banners indicating that they were Likud supporters, and they were there because this is not what they voted for.
Now, we see a lot of people, in the video that's on the screen and people from your interviews. But one man notably absent from the protests, opposition leader Yair Lapid, he was not allowed to give a speech, and so he decided not to attend. Was his absence felt?
No, people were not there to identify with any political leader. I didn't see any people identifying with any political party in particular. I know that a lot of opposition Knesset members were there, including from Yesh Atid. Lapid would not have been invited on stage to speak, as none of the other political leaders were invited up onto the stage to speak.
And yet,
he's sitting there.
He's the leader of the opposition. Today, he's called for a public referendum on the measures. What can you tell us about that?
Look, there's the fight in the Knesset, and I think that they realize that they don't have a majority there, they're going to lose. There's the fight in the streets where public opinion is felt. The idea of a referendum, I think, would be along those lines. I don't see how you get a referendum if you don't have control of the Knesset. The Knesset would have to pass a motion in order to a law, in effect, ordering a referendum on the issue. Okay. I do think. The public that was at the protest yesterday would vote overwhelmingly against the reforms, I can tell you.
And now, Steve, I'm just curious, has there been any response from the opposition to this protest?
From the coalition, from the government?
From the coalition, yes.
Yes, sure. Look, Mickey Zohar, I think, said it best. He said, to protest is the democratic thing to do, and so is to vote. His side won in the election. They have promised electoral reform. The question is it going to be a reform that is completely decided by the Likud and the coalition, or is it going to be some kind of a consensus? And I think that's where President Herzog is trying to weigh in. He's saying that he wants to try to mediate between the coalition and the opposition and reach legal reforms that have a wider agreement in the political world and in the public.